Alright class, this is our second boards for our homework. The topic is the classical period, early civilization. This board is considerably longer than the last one, so I'm going to talk a little bit faster. Our central question: what were some of the factors that led to early civilizations? Big early civilizations. Where did they start? On rivers. Major rivers supported early civilizations. Good farming. And it was good for the stock, or livestock, or cows and or sheep, whatever. Early civilizations started between 3000 and 2000 BCE. It shared similar cultural characteristics. The people that started to migrate together and create these early civilizations. Now, Mesopotamia is one of the first. It had lots of water, lots of history. The land, it's the definition of land between two rivers. The two rivers were the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Rivers were unpredictable and would often wash towns away, and for this reason, people learned how to build canals, build dams, and this really helped with irrigation as well. The first real big civilization was the Sumer, first successful major Mesopotamian civilization. It had successful agriculture. It had the first writing. Cuneiform was the first writing that, it's not the first in all time, but is one of the first that was very successful. In writing laws, treaties, customs, they developed math, 12-month calendar, even some geometry. They were polytheistic. More than one god is the definition of polytheistic. And they created temples, ziggurats. They oftentimes blamed the gods if there was a big flood, and then they attributed to these temples that wasn't big enough, or they didn't worship enough, and so this is the Sumer. Next was the Babylon civilization. It developed a code of Hammurabi. He was a king at that time. He created his own code of laws. Defined a rule of law, and it had rules for almost everything. So this was the first time we really saw laws instituted into civilizations. The Mesopotamia had many rulers. Babylonian fell to the Hittites. The Hittites developed iron, which was stronger than bronze. So the Hittites, ruled at that time. The Hittites then fought to the Assyrians. The Assyrians fell to the Chaldeans, the king, who then rebuilt Babylon. Babylon then fell to Persia, and Persia was a very mighty empire. Now, ancient Egypt developed on the Nile River. It was much more stable than the rivers that we were just talking about. It had a flood season, and the people were able to predict this. It led to the buildup of the food surplus, which enabled people to do other things that we talked about on our last video. Now, some of the Egyptian achievements: the pharaohs ruled with the use of writing, hieroglyphics. So just like the other civilization might have had cuneiform, they had hieroglyphics. It was dependent on trade in the Nile and in the Mediterranean Sea. This led them to have contact with other civilizations, which increased their power. They were polytheistic. They believed in an afterlife. They built huge pyramids, which most of us know about the pyramids of Egypt. Social structures that had this entire lifestyle that the Egyptians built had a social structure where the top was the pharaohs, they had priests, and of course the bottom were the slaves, and they were the ones that were toiling and building the giant pyramids. Women, there were some female rulers. The decline of the Egyptians. By 1100 BC, Egyptians began to decline. The Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, and eventually the Romans would take over that area. Now, the Indus River Valley is in present-day India. It has high mountains around the Indus River Valley, so it was more isolated than some of these other, the Tigris, Euphrates, and or Nile River. The Indus River Valley thrived from about 2500 BC to 1500 BC. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, they were large cities, 100,000 people plus, which is kind of unheard of. At this time, they had advanced planning. They had a high culture in these two cities. 1900, the cities were just abandoned, and nobody knows why. You know, the archaeologists tried to look for clues, but there's no clear answer. Aryans from the north migrated to the Indus River Valley. So they lived around the Black Sea. They traveled over the mountains through the Khyber Pass region and into the Indus River Valley. The Aryans brought polytheistic religion, which would eventually become Hinduism. They created a very elaborate social structure, and this social structure would dominate for thousands of years, and it's still actually in some part in practice today in India, even though this caste system was abandoned or outlawed in the 1950s. China developed along the Huang or Yellow River. It ruled from 1600 to 1100 BC. It was very isolated. It created science, math, calendar. It had a high level of thinkers. It was patriarchal, where families were led by the eldest son. Also, around 1100 BC, the Zhao dynasty took over. The Zhao dynasty introduced the mandates of heaven. Heaven grants the Zhao rulers power. So the mandates of heaven, we will compare that when we get to the Middle Ages, where we talk about how the rulers at that time felt that they had the right to rule because God said so. Feudal system of kings, nobles, protection that led to bureaucracies or departments that specialized in whatever they could help the king out with. In West Africa, 1500 BCE, farmers from the Niger and Benue rivers moved south and east. These people that lived in this area spoke a language called Bantu, and so this movement was called the Bantu migrations. Bantu speakers influenced others as they moved. In the upper Niger River Valley, Jenou was a very large populated city from 250 BC to about 400 CE. And so this was one of the first big civilizations in sub-Saharan Africa at this time. Early Mesoamerica, the Olmec, which is in present-day Mexico, and the Chavín, which is in present-day Peru, they developed, and the Olmec and the Chavín are very interesting because all of the other things that we've talked about, all of the other civilizations developed on a river valley, and these two did not. So they're similar societies, but isolated from each other. You know, one's in Mexico, one's in Peru, so that's, you know, different continents, but they were very similar. It did not develop on a river, so that's something that's very individualistic compared to the other civilizations that were created on a river. All right, remember, history's no mystery. Take good notes.